The clock on the wall read 2:14 a.m. The heavy double doors of Operating Room 3 slammed shut, echoing like a gunshot through the sterile hallway of Mercy General Hospital. On one side of that door stood Elena Vance, a veteran trauma nurse with blood on her scrubs and tears of rage in her eyes. She had just been forcibly removed from surgery by Dr. Marcus Sterling, the hospital's most powerful surgeon. He gave her an order: "Get out, or I'll bury your career." Sterling thought the problem was solved. He thought he was alone with an unconscious John Doe. But he was wrong. He didn't know who was on the table. He didn't know that Elena Vance wasn't just walking away. And he certainly didn't know that in exactly 9 minutes, the elevator doors down the hall wouldn't open for a doctor. They would be blown open by a squad of Navy SEALs who weren't asking for permission to enter. This is the story of the mistake that almost started a war, and the one nurse who stood between a hero and the grave. The trauma bay at Mercy General in Seattle was usually a symphony of controlled chaos, but tonight it felt like a funeral procession. The rain battered the windows, a relentless drumbeat against the glass, matching the frenetic pacing of the night shift. Elena Vance snapped her latex gloves on the sound, sharp in the humid air. She had been the lead trauma nurse here for 12 years. She knew the rhythm of life and death better than she knew her own heartbeat. But tonight, the rhythm was off. "ETA 2 minutes, the paramedic shouted over the radio. "Male approx 30s unconscious, found near the Port Authority. Multiple GSWs, gunshot wounds, severe brachycardia. No ID." Dr. Marcus Sterling swept into the room, his white coat pristine, contrasting with the grime of the trauma bay. Sterling was the new chief of trauma surgery, a transfer from Hopkins, with a jawline sharp enough to cut glass and an ego that required its own zip code. He didn't walk. He glided, expecting the waters to part. "Prepare all 3. Sterling barked, not looking at the staff. "I want him on the table in 5. If he has multiple GSWs, we're looking at a thoracotomy. Let's not waste time." Elena frowned. "Doctor, we need to stabilize him in the bay first. The paramedics mentioned bradycardia. His heart rate is too low for standard shock. We need to run a tox screen before we put him under anesthesia." Sterling stopped. He turned slowly, his icy blue eyes fixing on Elena like a predator spotting a wounded animal. "Nurse Vance, is it?" "It is." She held her ground. "I didn't realize you had completed your residency and board certification in the last 10 minutes. Sterling said, his voice dripping with that specific brand of academic condescension. "This man is bleeding out. Every second we wait for your tox screen is a second closer to his death. Get him to OR3. Now!" Eleanor bit her tongue. Hierarchy was the religion of the hospital, and Sterling was the high priest. But as the gurney burst through the bay doors, flanked by rain-soaked paramedics, Eleanor's gut twisted. The patient was a mountain of a man. Even pale and covered in grime, he looked built of iron. But it wasn't the bullet holes that caught Elena's eye. It was his skin. As they transferred him to the surgical table, Elena cut away his shirt. Beneath the blood, his veins were dark, almost black against his pale skin. And there was a smell. Not the metallic tang of blood, but something sweeter, like almonds. "Doctor," Elena said, her voice urgent as she hooked up the leads. "Look at the venous mapping. Look at the discoloration. This isn't just hemorrhagic shock. This looks like poisoning. Cyanide, maybe, or something synthetic." Sterling was already scrubbing in. He was found at the port. Probably a junkie who got shot in a deal gone wrong. "Stop playing Detective Vance. Push 20 of etomidate and 100 of Sux. We're cutting. If we use succinylcholine, and he has been exposed to a nerve agent or organophosphates. We could stop his heart permanently. Elena argued, her hand hovering over the IV port. Please give me 2 minutes to check his pupils and run a gas. Sterling stepped up to the table, scalpel in hand. The rest of the team, Dr. Aris Anesthesiology and 2 junior residents, went silent. The air in the room grew heavy, suffocating. Nurse Vance, Sterling said softly, which was far scarier than his shouting. You are insubordinate. You are delaying a life-saving procedure based on a hunch. Step away from the patient. I'm trying to save him. Get out. Sterling pointed the scalpel towards the door. Remove yourself from my OR, or I will have security remove you, and you will be stripped of your license by morning. Elena looked at the patient. The monitor beeped sluggishly. 45 BPM. 44. She looked at Dr. Aris, pleading with her eyes. Aris looked down, terrified of Sterling. Fine, Elena whispered. She ripped off her gloves and threw them in the bin. But when he flatlines, it's on you. She stormed out. The heavy doors slammed shut behind her, sealing the tomb. Elena stood in the hallway, her chest heaving. The silence of the corridor was a jarring contrast to the noise inside her head. The smell of almonds, the black veins. She wasn't crazy. She had seen this before, years ago, during a brief rotation she did with a humanitarian aid group in a conflict zone. She looked at the clock. 02:18 a.m. She had 2 choices. Go to the break room, cry, and update her resume, or find out who the hell was on that table. She chose the latter. Elena ran to the prep room, where the paramedics had dumped the patient's belongings. It was a standard plastic patient effects bag. Usually for a John Doe, this contained dirty clothes, maybe a cheap lighter, some loose change. She grabbed the bag. It was surprisingly heavy. She dumped the contents onto the stainless steel counter. A pair of heavy-duty tactical boots, laces cut. A soaked t-shirt. A watch. Elena picked up the watch. It wasn't a Rolex or a cheap digital. It was a Garmin Tactics military grade, beaten to hell, scratch-proof glass. But it was the other item that stopped her breath. Tucked into a hidden pocket of the wet tactical pants was a small waterproof hard case, no bigger than a wallet. Elena popped the latch. Inside wasn't a driver's license. It was a transponder, a small black device with a single green light blinking rhythmically. And next to it, a challenge coin. She picked up the coin. It was heavy, cold gold. On one side, the emblem of the United States Navy. On the other, a skull and a trident. Navy SEALs. Oh my God, Elena whispered. The man on the table wasn't a junkie. He was an operator. And the poison, she suspected. If he had been in a compromised zone, he might have been dosed with a binary agent. If Sterling cut into him, if he opened the chest cavity, without knowing what was in the bloodstream, the release of pressure combined with the wrong anesthesia could trigger a systemic collapse. Not just killing the soldier, but potentially releasing toxic gas into the OR. Elena looked at the transponder. The blinking light was speeding up. 02:20 a.m. She grabbed the transponder. On the back, there was no serial number, just a sequence of digits and a red button. She didn't hesitate. She pressed the button. Nothing happened for 3 seconds. Then the prep room phone on the wall rang. It was a jarring mechanical ring that made Elena jump. She stared at it. This was an internal line. It shouldn't be ringing from an external source. She picked it up. Hello. Identify, a voice said. It wasn't human. It sounded synthesized, cold, and terrifyingly clear. "This is Nurse Elena Vance, Mercy General Hospital. I have the device. The patient is in surgery. The surgeon is about to cut. I think the patient is toxic." "Status of the asset," the voice demanded. The patient. He's in OR3. The surgeon, Dr. Sterling, kicked me out. He doesn't know. He thinks it's a standard trauma." "Listen to me carefully, Nurse Vance." The voice changed. It was a human man now shouting over the roar of a helicopter engine. "Do not let them cut the asset. Do you understand? If they induce he dies, we are 9 minutes out. You need to buy us time." "I can't," Elena cried, looking through the small glass window of the prep room toward the OR doors. "He's the chief of surgery. I'm just a nurse. He fired me." "Then you need to become more than a nurse," the voice growled. "You are the only thing keeping Commander Thorne alive. Disrupt the power. Pull the fire alarm. I don't care. We are coming. If he dies, Vance, nobody goes home." The line went dead. 02:22 a.m. Elena dropped the phone. Commander Thorne. She looked down the hall. The surgery in progress light above OR3 was illuminated. A bright, burning red warning. She ran. Inside OR3, the atmosphere was tense. Dr. Sterling held the scalpel hovering over the chest of the unconscious man. "Scalpel is dull," he muttered, tossing it onto a tray with a clang that made the scrub tech flinch. "Give me a fresh one, and tell me why his pressure is still dropping. I told you to push the fluids." "We're pushing, Doctor," Dr. Aris said, her voice trembling. "But he's resistant. His O2 saturation is falling. 88%. 85. It's because he's bleeding internally," Sterling snapped. "New blade, now." Outside, Elena reached the scrub sinks just outside the OR doors. She needed a weapon. Not a gun, but something that would stop a surgeon. She saw the main breaker panel for the surgical wing. It was behind a locked glass case. She grabbed a heavy oxygen tank wrench sitting on a nearby cart and smashed the glass. Crash! The sound echoed, but nobody came out. The OR was soundproofed. She reached for the breakers. If she cut the power, the backup generators would kick in, but there would be a 10-second delay. That 10 seconds would force the machines to reset the lights to flicker. It would break Sterling's concentration. It would buy her a moment to re-enter. She yanked the main lever down. Wham! The hallway plunged into darkness. Inside OR3, the lights died instantly. The hum of the ventilation system cut out. For a terrifying 3 seconds it was pitch black, save for the glow of the vitals monitor. "What the hell is going on?" Sterling screamed in the dark. "Power failure! Backup engaging!" Aris shouted. The emergency lights flickered on a dim, eerie orange glow. The automatic doors to the OR slid open halfway, stuck on the reboot cycle. Elena Vance squeezed through the gap. "Stop!" she screamed. Sterling spun around, illuminated by the emergency lights, looking like a demon. I told you to get out. You cut the power. Are you insane?" "He's a Navy SEAL," Elena shouted, stepping fully into the room, holding the printed readout from the transponder she'd grabbed, though it was just a bluff. "He has a binary toxin in his blood. If you cut him, you release it. Look at the monitor, Doctor. Look at the pattern." Sterling laughed. It was a manic disbelief laugh. "A Navy SEAL. This is a homeless man found in the gutter. You have lost your mind, Vance. Security." He turned back to the patient. I am making the incision. If you come closer, I will have you arrested for assault. Don't do it! Elena lunged. She didn't go for Sterling. She went for the patient. She threw her body over the chest of Commander Thorne, shielding the incision site with her own torso. Get off him! Sterling roared. He grabbed Elena by the scrub top and yanked. She held on to the side rails of the bed. You have to listen to me. Look at his neck. The veins are black. Sterling wrestled with her. It was ugly. A surgeon fighting a nurse over an unconscious body. Security! Sterling bellowed again. 2 hospital security guards, burly men named Miller and Davis, squeezed through the half-open doors. Get her out of here, Sterling ordered, breathless, his face purple with rage. Handcuff her to the radiator if you have to. Miller grabbed Elena's arm. Come on, Elena. Don't make this hard. Miller, listen to me, Elena pleaded as they dragged her off the patient. This man is special ops. Help is coming. Just wait 5 minutes. You're having a breakdown, Elena, Miller said, sadly, pulling her toward the door. Sterling adjusted his gown. He picked up the scalpel again. Finally. Let's get this over with. He placed the tip of the blade against the skin of Commander Thorne's chest. 02:26 a.m. A low rumble shook the floor. It wasn't thunder. It was rhythmic. Thump, 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 thump. It was getting louder. The instruments on the metal trays began to rattle. Is that an earthquake? Dr. Aris asked, looking at the ceiling. The noise grew to a deafening roar. It was directly above them. The hospital roof. Suddenly the PA system crackled. But it wasn't the hospital operator. This is United States Naval Special Warfare Group 1. A voice boomed through the entire hospital speakers, loud enough to wake the dead. Code Black in Sector 4. All personnel, stand down. Secure the ore. I repeat, secure the ore. Sterling froze, scalpel touching the skin. What is this? Is this a prank? Elena, held by the guards near the door, slumped in relief. I told you, she whispered. They're here. Crash. The window of the scrub room adjacent to the OR shattered inward as a rappel line dropped from the roof. The shattering of the scrub room window wasn't just a noise. It was a declaration. The storm outside seemed to pour into the sterile environment, bringing with it the smell of ozone and wet asphalt. Before Dr. Sterling could process the glass shards skittering across the floor, the heavy double doors of the operating room were kicked open with such force that the magnetic locks shattered. They didn't walk in. They flooded the room. 6 men. Clad in full tactical gear, soaked from the rain, their faces obscured by ballistic masks and night vision goggles that were flipped up, revealing eyes that scanned the room with terrifying precision. They moved like water fluid, silent and unstoppable. The red laser sights of their suppressed carbines swept across the room, creating a web of light that cut through the dim emergency power. Hands! The lead operator bellowed. His voice was a gravel shaker loud enough to rattle the teeth of everyone in the room. Show me hands now. Doctor. Aris, the anesthesiologist, shrieked and threw her hands up, backing into the anesthesia cart. The 2 junior residents dropped to the floor, covering their heads. Dr. Sterling stood frozen, the scalpel still in his hand, hovering inches from Commander Thorne's chest. He was a man used to being the god of his operating theater, but now actual gods of war had entered his temple. Drop the blade! A SEAL shouted his weapon, trained directly on Sterling's forehead. Drop it, or I drop you. Sterling's fingers opened involuntarily. The scalpel clattered onto the linoleum floor. The two security guards, Miller and Davis, who were holding Elena, immediately let go of her and raised their hands. They were hospital rent-a-cops. They knew they were out of their league by a factor of infinity. The lead SEAL, a towering figure with a patch on his shoulder reading Bravo 1, marched straight toward the operating table. He ignored Sterling. He ignored the trembling staff. He went straight to the unconscious man. He placed a gloved hand on the patient's neck, checking for a pulse, then looked at the monitor. "Asset is critical but stable," Bravo 1 said into his comms. "We have control of the room. Secure the perimeter. No one in or out without my authorization. If the administrator tries to enter, zip-tie him." He turned slowly to face the room. He pulled down his ballistic mask. He was an older man, maybe mid-40s, with a scar running through his graying stubble and eyes that looked like they had seen the end of the world. This was Master Chief Hayes. Hayes looked at Sterling, then at the security guards, and finally his gaze landed on Elena Vance. She was standing by the door, rubbing her arm, where the guard had grabbed her, trembling not from fear, but from adrenaline. "Who is the primary provider?" Hayes asked, his voice calmer now, but no less commanding. "I am." Sterling stepped forward, trying to regain his composure. He puffed out his chest, adjusting his pristine white coat, which was now dampened by the humidity entering the broken window. "I am Dr. Marcus Sterling, Chief of Trauma Surgery. You are violating federal law by entering this facility armed. I demand you leave immediately before I call the police." Hayes looked at Sterling like he was a bug on a windshield. He didn't even blink. He turned his back on the surgeon and looked at Elena. "You," Hayes said, pointing at her. "You're the one who called it in." "Nurse Vance?" "Yes." Elena managed to say, her voice steadying. "Yes, that was me." "You said he was toxic," Hayes said, stepping closer to her, ignoring Sterling's sputtering indignation. "How did you know?" "The veins," Elena said, walking back toward the table, her confidence returning as she focused on the medicine. "Venous discoloration, the smell of almonds on his skin, and the bradycardia resistant to atropine. It fits the profile of a binary cyanide-based agent, probably synthesized. If he is cut open without neutralizing the blood agent first, the gas released will kill everyone in this room in under 30 seconds. Hayes stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Smart. You were right." He turned to Sterling. "You were about to cut him." "He has internal bleeding," Sterling yelled, his face turning red. "He needs surgery. I don't care who he is. If we don't stop the bleeding, he dies. This nurse is hallucinating about poison." Hayes walked up to Sterling. The height difference wasn't much, but the presence difference was staggering. Hayes leaned in. "That nurse just saved your life, Doctor, and the lives of your staff. If you had made that incision, you'd be choking on your own lungs right now." Hayes turned back to the door. "Sutton, get in here." A seventh SEAL entered. He wasn't carrying a rifle. He was carrying a massive medical pack marked with a red cross. This was Hospital Corpsman First Class Sutton, the team's medic. He was younger, with wire-rimmed glasses and an intense focus. "Check him," Hayes ordered. Sutton moved to the table, pulling out a handheld chemical analyzer. He scanned the patient's skin and the IV line. The device beeped rapidly, a high-pitched, urgent warning. "Confirmed," Sutton said, looking up, his face pale. "High levels of compound CN9. It's a prototype nerve agent. It bonds to the hemoglobin. It's dormant until it hits oxygen. If we open him up, it activates." The room went dead silent. The residents looked at Elena with wide eyes. Sterling's jaw dropped. He looked at the patient, then at Elena. He had almost killed them all. "We have the antidote," Sutton said, pulling a reinforced metal vial from his kit. "But I'm a field medic, Master Chief. I can neutralize the blood, but I can't fix the damage the bullets did to his liver and lung. He needs a surgeon." Hayes looked at Sterling. The surgeon was shaking. The reality of his near-fatal mistake had shattered his ego. He looked at his hands. They were trembling. I can't," Sterling whispered. "The risk. The exposure." "Coward," Hayes muttered. He looked at Elena. "Can you do it?" Elena blinked. "I'm a nurse. I can't perform surgery." "You've been running this trauma bay for 10 years, Vance." A new voice spoke. Elena turned. It was Dr. Aris, the anesthesiologist. She had stepped away from the wall. "I've seen you walk residents through procedures they didn't understand. I've seen you stop surgeons from nicking arteries. You know the anatomy better than half the staff." "We don't need a certificate," Hayes said, his voice hard. "We need hands. Sutton can assist, but he's not a thoracic specialist. You know this hospital. You know the equipment. And you're the only one here who cared enough to notice the poison." "I can't operate alone," Eleanor said, her mind racing. I need a surgeon to close. I need someone to handle the vascular clamps." She looked at Sterling. He was useless right now, broken by fear. She looked at the junior residents. They were children. "I'll do it," Elena said, her voice finding steel. "But I'm in charge. This is my OR now." Hayes cracked a rare, grim smile. "You heard the lady. Everyone listen up. Nurse Vance is the ranking officer in this room. If she asks for a scalpel, you give it to her. If she asks for the moon, you start building a rocket." "Do we understand hoo-ah?" the SEALs chorused in unison. Elena took a deep breath. She walked to the sink. "Sutton, administer the antidote. Dr. Aris, prep for a rapid sequence intubation. Sterling." She turned to the chief of surgery. "Get out of my OR." Dr. Sterling didn't argue. He didn't fight. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. He stripped off his gloves, threw them on the floor, and walked out the door escorted by 2 SEALs who practically carried him. His career ended the moment the doors swung shut behind him. But there was no time to revel in the victory. The monitor was screaming. "Heart rate dropping to 30, Dr. Aris shouted. "We're losing him." "Sutton, push the antidote," Elena commanded, snapping on fresh gloves. "Aris, push 1 milliliters of epi. We need to cycle his blood before we can cut." Sutton injected the thick blue liquid into the IV. "Antidote in. It needs 2 minutes to bind to the toxin." "We don't have 2 minutes," Eleanor said, watching the pressure gauge. "His belly is distended. He's bleeding into his abdomen. If we wait, he strokes out. If we cut, we gas the room." She looked at the tactical gear of the SEALs. "Masks," Elena shouted. "Does everyone have gas masks?" "We do," Hayes said. "My men are equipped for biohazard." "What about us?" Dr. Aris asked, her voice rising in panic. Elena looked at the anesthesia cart. "The closed-circuit loops. We can hook ourselves up to the auxiliary oxygen supply. It's not a gas mask, but it's positive pressure. It will keep the room air out of our lungs." "That's risky," Sutton said. "So is letting him die," Elena countered. "Do it. Everyone mask up." For the next 90 seconds, the OR was a flurry of improvisation. Elena Aris and the 2 residents strapped clear anesthesia masks to their faces, hooking the long tubes into the wall oxygen. They looked like divers preparing for a deep descent. The SEALs lowered their tactical visors and engaged their rebreathers, the sound of Darth Vader-like breathing filling the room. "Time," Elena asked, her voice muffled by the plastic mask. 90 seconds on the antidote, Sutton said. It's barely enough. It has to be, Elena said. She picked up the scalpel, the same instrument Sterling had held. It felt heavier in her hand. She wasn't a surgeon, but she had stood across from them for 12 years. She knew the moves. She knew the dance. Incision, retract, clamp, tie. Scalpel, she whispered to herself. She placed the blade on the abdomen of Commander Thorne. She looked at Hayes. The Master Chief gave her a single firm nod. She pressed down. The skin parted. Dark blood welled up immediately. Suction, she ordered. One of the residents, a young man named Dr. Lee, shook off his fear and grabbed the suction wand. It's dark, Elena noted. But it's not black. The antidote is working. There was no hiss of gas, no smell of almonds. The room air remained clear. We're clear, Sutton confirmed, checking his sensor. Toxin neutralized. Okay, Elena breathed. Now we just have to fix the bullet holes. She reached into the abdominal cavity. Her hands moved with a speed that surprised even her. She wasn't thinking. She was reacting. She felt the liver it was lacerated. She felt the warmth of fresh blood pumping from a severed vessel. I have a bleeder on the hepatic artery, she announced. I can't see it. There's too much blood. Pack it, Sutton said, stepping in to retract the muscle wall. I've got the retractor. I need a vascular clamp, Elena said. She reached blindly into the pool of blood, her fingers searching for the pulsing artery. It was like trying to find a coin in a bucket of oil. Come on, she gritted her teeth. Where are you? The monitor beeped faster. Beep, beep, beep. A warning. Pressure 60/40, Aris called out. He's bottoming out. I can't find the bleeder, Elena yelled. Suddenly a hand reached into the sterile field. A large, gloved hand. It wasn't Sutton. Elena looked up. It was the patient. Commander Thorne's eyes were open. He wasn't conscious, not really. It was a reflex, the lizard brain of a warrior fighting death. His hand clamped over Elena's hand inside his own stomach. Whoa! Sutton shouted. Restrain him! No, wait, Elena said. Thorne's hand wasn't fighting her. It was guiding her. His grip was weak, but he pushed her fingers down and to the left, deeper than she had dared to go. She followed the pressure. Her finger slipped into a tear in the tissue behind the liver. She felt the spurting artery. He knew where he was hit. Even in a coma, he knew his own body. Elena clamped the vessel. The bleeding stopped instantly. Thorne's hand dropped back to the table limp. His eyes closed. Pressure stabilizing. Aris gasped, disbelief in her voice. 70/50. 80/60. Elena looked at the unconscious soldier. Did you see that? I saw it, Hayes said quietly from the corner. That's why he's the commander. He doesn't know how to quit. He bought us time, Elena said. Now let's finish this. The surgery lasted 4 hours. It was a grueling marathon. Elena Vance, a nurse who had been told to leave the room, performed a liver resection and a bowel repair that would have tested a board-certified surgeon. Sutton, the combat medic, acted as her first assist. His movements precise and efficient. The SEAL team stood guard, a silent wall of protection around the sterile field. Dr. Sterling never returned. Rumor had it he was in his office calling his lawyers, but the phone lines to the surgical wing had mysteriously been cut. At 06:00 a.m., the sun began to rise over Seattle. The storm had passed, leaving the sky a bruised purple and gray. Elena placed the final stitch. She tied the knot and cut the suture. "Close," she whispered. "It's done." She stepped back, her legs wobbling. She had been running on adrenaline and fear for hours, and now the crash was coming. "Vitals?" she asked. "Stable," Dr. Aris said, her voice filled with awe. 110/70. Sinus rhythm. He's going to make it. Elena pulled the mask off her face. She had deep red lines where the plastic had dug into her skin. She looked at her hands. They were covered in the blood of a man she didn't know. A man who had almost killed them all. A man who had guided her hand from the brink of death. Master Chief Hayes stepped forward. He holstered his sidearm. He walked up to Elena and extended a hand. "Nurse Vance," he said. Elena took his hand. It was rough, calloused, and swallowed hers completely. "You did good," Hayes said. "Damn good." Is he going to be okay?" Elena asked, looking at Thorne. "He's tough," Hayes said, "but he owes you a beer, maybe a brewery." The doors to the OR hissed open. But this time it wasn't a tactical entry. It was the hospital administrator, accompanied by the chief of medicine and 2 terrified-looking police officers. "What is the meaning of this?" the administrator demanded, spotting the armed men. "I have reports of a hostage situation, Dr. Sterling says." Hayes turned. He didn't yell. He just held up a hand. "Situation is secure," Hayes said calmly. "This man is a high-value asset of the United States government. Your surgeon, Dr. Sterling, attempted to compromise that asset through gross negligence. Nurse Vance assumed command and rectified the situation." The administrator looked at Elena. She looked like a wreck, blood-spattered, exhausted hair a mess. "Elena," the administrator asked, You operated—" "She saved his life," Sutton interjected, stepping forward, "and she prevented a chemical decontamination event that would have shut this hospital down for a month." Hayes reached into his tactical vest. He pulled out a card. It was black with gold embossing. He handed it to the administrator. "Call this number," Hayes said. "The Pentagon will explain the rest. As for Dr. Sterling, I suggest you check his office. I believe he's currently explaining to the FBI why he tried to perform a contraindicated procedure on a Tier 1 operator." Hayes turned back to Elena. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. It was the challenge coin she had found in Thorne's pocket. "He would want you to have this," Hayes said, pressing the heavy coin into her palm. "It's a life debt coin. It means your family now. If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call the number on that card." Elena looked at the coin. The skull and trident gleamed under the surgical lights. "We're moving him," Hayes said. "Our transport is on the roof. We have a medical facility at the base." "He's not stable enough to move," Elena protested instinctively. Hayes smiled. "He's a SEAL, ma'am. He's safer in a Black Hawk than he is in this hospital." The team moved with practiced efficiency. In 2 minutes, they had transferred Thorne to a travel stretcher. They swept out of the room as quickly as they had entered. As the doors swung shut, Eleanor was left standing alone in the silent OR. The floor was a mess of bloody gauze and wrappers. The air still smelled faintly of antiseptic and sweat. She was alone. But for the first time in 12 years, she didn't feel like just a nurse. She squeezed the coin in her hand. She walked out of the OR. The hallway was empty save for Dr. Sterling's white coat, which had been tossed on a chair near the nurse's station. Elena picked it up. She walked to the trash can, and she dropped it in. The silence that fell over Operating Room 3 after the SEALs departed was heavier than the chaos that had preceded it. The heavy double doors, usually a barrier against infection, now felt like the gates of a prison cell that had just been blown open. Elena Vance stood alone in the wreckage. The floor was slick with saline blood, and the scattered debris of a war zone shattered glass from the scrub room window. Cut zip ties discarded tactical gloves. The air still held the metallic tang of adrenaline and the faint, lingering scent of the ozone from the storm outside. For a long time, she just stared at her hands. They were trembling now, a delayed reaction to the adrenaline crash. These were the hands that had just defied a chief surgeon. These were the hands that had held a scalpel inside a man's abdomen while surrounded by men with guns. The doors hissed open. This time, it wasn't a tactical entry. It was chaos of a different kind. The hospital administrator, Mr. Galloway, burst in, flanked by the chief of medicine, 3 hospital security guards, and 2 uniformed Seattle police officers. "Where is he?" Galloway demanded, his face pale and sweating. He looked around the empty room, his eyes landing on the shattered window and the rappel line swaying in the wind. "Where is the patient? Where is Dr. Sterling? The patient has been transferred," Elena said, her voice sounding hollow to her own ears. She stripped off her bloodied gown, wadding it up. "Dr. Sterling. Left," Galloway sputtered. "We have reports of armed gunmen. The entire wing is on lockdown. You were the only one in here, Vance. What the hell happened?" "A federal extraction," Elena said calmly. She felt a strange detachment, as if she were watching herself from the ceiling. Dr. Sterling attempted to perform a contraindicated procedure on a Tier 1 asset. I intervened. The asset was stabilized and removed by his unit. "You intervened?" The chief of medicine. Dr. Larch stepped forward, his face twisting in disbelief. "You're a nurse, Eleanor. Are you telling me you operated—" "I saved his life," Elena said, meeting his gaze. "And I saved this hospital from being designated a biohazard zone." "Arrest her," Galloway barked at the police officers. "She's clearly hysterical. She's destroyed a crime scene. I want her removed." The officers hesitated. They looked at the shattered window, the high-tech medical debris that didn't belong to the hospital, and then at the exhausted woman standing amidst it all. "Ma'am," one officer said gently, "we need you to come with us, just to sort this out." Elena nodded. She reached into her scrub pocket, her fingers brushing the cold, heavy metal of the challenge coin. Family Hayes had said. She walked out of the OR escorted by police, while the hospital administration began the frantic work of burying the truth all. The next 48 hours were a blur of windowless rooms and bad coffee. Elena wasn't taken to the police station. She was taken to a federal building downtown. The interrogation room was cold, sterile, and smelled of lemon cleaner. Across the table sat 2 men. One was Agent Miller, FBI. The other was an older man in a Navy suit, who didn't introduce himself, but whose demeanor screamed military intelligence. "Let's go over it again, Ms. Vance," Miller said, looking at a thick file. "You claim Dr. Sterling knew about the toxin." "He was told," Elena said, leaning forward. "I told him. The patient's symptoms told him. He ignored it." "Dr. Sterling is a renowned surgeon," the older man said softly. "A man with a spotless record. You, on the other hand, have a history of insubordination. A reprimand 3 years ago for arguing with a resident. I argued because he was prescribing a lethal dose of morphine," Elena shot back. "I was right then, and I was right last night." "We found the transfer," Miller interrupted, glancing at his colleague. "We checked Sterling's financials." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The skepticism evaporated, replaced by a grim shark-like focus. "What did you find?" Elena asked. $2 million, Miller said. "Wired to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands at 8:00 p.m. last night, 6 hours before the patient arrived." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "He knew. He didn't just know," Miller said. "He was waiting. The ambush at the Port Authority wasn't random. It was a setup to get the commander to Mercy General. Sterling was the closer. He was paid to ensure the asset died on the table and to make it look like surgical complications." Elena felt sick. She thought of Sterling's arrogance, his rush to cut his refusal to listen. It hadn't been ego. It had been a hit. He was going to release the gas kill. The commander killed the staff, including her, and blame it on the toxicity of the patient. He would have walked away the sole survivor, claiming he tried everything. "We picked him up at SeaTac Airport an hour ago," the older man said. "He was trying to board a flight to Dubai. He's in custody." Miller closed the file. "You're not a suspect, Ms. Vance. You're a witness. A very important one. But this is classified. Do you understand the existence of the unit, the nature of the toxin? None of this leaves this room." "What about the hospital?" Elena asked. "They fired me. They think I'm crazy." "Let them think what they want," the older man said. "The unit takes care of its own. But you need to go back there and finish the narrative. Resign quietly. Disappear." 3 days later, Elena walked into the hospital boardroom. It felt like walking into a lion's den. But the lions were toothless. The board of directors sat around the long mahogany table looking uncomfortable. Mr. Galloway, the administrator who had tried to have her arrested, wouldn't meet her eyes. "Ms. Vance," Galloway began, his voice strained. "Please sit." Elena remained standing. She wore civilian clothes, jeans, and a sweater. She felt small in the massive room, but she didn't feel weak. "We have been in contact with certain federal authorities," Galloway said, choosing his words carefully. "It appears we were mistaken about the events of that night. Dr. Sterling's departure has been sudden." "He's in federal prison," Elena said bluntly, "for conspiracy to commit murder." The board members flinched. They wanted to pretend Sterling had just retired. They wanted to pretend the FBI hadn't raided the surgical wing. "Yes, well," Galloway cleared his throat. "The hospital is prepared to offer a settlement for your trouble, and to ensure your continued discretion regarding the specific medical details of the case." He slid a thick envelope across the polished wood. "We are also prepared to offer you the position of Director of Nursing." A female board member added a tight, fake smile plastered on her face. "With a substantial salary increase. We need someone with your crisis management skills." Elena looked at the envelope. It represented security. It represented vindication. For 12 years she had worked double shifts, missed holidays, and swallowed her pride for this hospital. She had wanted this promotion more than anything. But looking at them now, these people who had been ready to throw her to the wolves to protect a murderer like Sterling, she felt nothing but cold disgust. "Crisis management," Elena repeated. "Is that what you call it? When your chief surgeon tries to gas the OR for a paycheck, and you try to arrest the nurse who stops him." "We were protecting the hospital's reputation," Galloway snapped, "and we are trying to compensate you. Don't be difficult, Elena. If you walk away, you'll be blacklisted. We control the narrative in this city." Elena reached into her pocket. She felt the coin. The weight of it grounded her. She thought about the look in Commander Thorne's eyes when he guided her hand. She thought about Master Chief Hayes calling her family. That was honor. That was loyalty. This room. This was just a business transaction. You don't control anything, Elena said softly. You didn't control Sterling. You didn't control the seals. And you certainly don't control me. She didn't take the envelope. She didn't even look at it. She reached into her purse and pulled out her hospital ID badge. The plastic was scratched, the photo from when she was 24, bright-eyed and hopeful. She tossed it onto the table. It slid across the mahogany and hit the envelope with a soft click. I quit, Elena said. You're making a mistake. Galloway warned, his face reddening. You'll never work in a major trauma center again. I know. Elena smiled, and for the first time in days, it was a real smile. That's the best news I've heard all week. The walk to her car was the hardest part. She had to walk past the trauma bay. She saw her colleagues, Dr. Aris, the nurses, the residents. They stopped talking when they saw her. They stared. Some looked confused, others looked awed, but most just looked afraid. The rumor mill had spun 100 different stories. Elena was a hero. Elena was a spy. Elena was crazy. Dr. Aris caught her eye near the exit. The anesthesiologist looked tired. Elena, she called out. Elena stopped. Is it true? Aris whispered, looking around to make sure no one was listening. Did Sterling really? He did, Elena said. Watch your back, Aris. They don't care about us. They never did. She walked out the automatic sliding doors into the Seattle drizzle. She sat in her car for a long time, the engine off. She was unemployed. She was likely blacklisted just as Galloway had threatened. She had rent due in 2 weeks. Panic started to creep in at the edges of her mind. What had she done? She was a trauma nurse. It was all she knew. Without the hospital, who was she? She opened her hand. The gold coin sat in her palm. United States Naval Special Warfare. She took a deep breath. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was the woman who held the line. She started the car. She didn't know where she was going next, but she knew she wasn't going back. She drove out of the parking structure, leaving the ivory tower of Mercy General in her rearview mirror. The grey sky seemed a little brighter than before. The war at the hospital was over. But the silence that followed was deafening. Elena drove south toward Tacoma, toward anonymity, wondering if the phone would ever ring, or if the men in the shadows had forgotten her as quickly as they had appeared. Little did she know, they were the only ones who remembered. 6 months later. The rain in Seattle never really stopped. It just took breaks. Eleanor Vance was working at a small urgent care clinic in Tacoma, about 40 minutes south of the city. It was quiet work. Stitches, flu shots, sprained ankles. No trauma, no egos, no death. She lived in a small apartment near the water. Her life was simple. She drank tea, she read books, and she tried not to think about the night that changed everything. But she kept the coin. It sat on her nightstand next to her alarm clock. Every morning it was the first thing she saw. The gold had dulled slightly, but the skull and trident were as sharp as ever. She had tried to call the number Hayes gave her once, about a week after she quit. It went straight to a disconnected tone. She searched for Commander Thorne online. Nothing. She searched for Navy SEAL Incident Seattle. Nothing. It was as if they never existed. Sometimes late at night she wondered if she had imagined it all. Maybe it was a breakdown. Maybe she really was crazy. But then she would see the news about Dr. Paul Sterling. He was awaiting trial for conspiracy to commit murder and material support to terrorism. That part was real. The rest just a ghost story. It was a Tuesday evening closing time. Elena locked the front door of the clinic and flipped the sign to closed. She pulled her coat tight against the chill and walked toward her car. The parking lot was empty except for her sedan and a large black pickup truck parked in the far corner. The engine was idling. Elena's instinct flared. After the FBI investigation, she was jumpy. She gripped her keys between her knuckles, a trick she learned from a self-defense class, and walked faster. The truck door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall. Even in the dim light of the street lamp, he was imposing. He wore dark jeans, a grey hoodie, and a baseball cap pulled low. He wasn't wearing a uniform. He wasn't wearing tactical gear. But Elena knew the walk. She knew the shoulders. She stopped. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. The man walked toward her. He moved with a slight limp, barely noticeable but there. He stopped 10 feet away. He took off his cap. His hair was short, dark, flecked with grey at the temples. His face was rugged, scarred, but handsome in a way that felt dangerous. His eyes were dark, intense, and locked onto hers. "Nurse Vance," he said, his voice. It was the voice she had heard in her nightmares and her dreams, deep, gravelly. "Commander Thorne," she whispered. He cracked a small, crooked smile. "Call me Elias. Commander is for the guys who salute me." He walked closer. He didn't look like a ghost anymore. He looked very, very real. I thought you were gone," Elena said, her voice shaking. "I tried the number. It was disconnected." "We had to go dark," Elias said. "After the leak with Sterling, we couldn't trust anyone. The unit was pulled back to Virginia. We spent the last 6 months hunting down the people who paid your surgeon. Did you find them?" Elias's eyes hardened. "We found them. They won't be writing any more checks." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. "Why are you here?" Elena asked. "If you're safe, if the mission is over, why come back?" Elias reached into his pocket. For a second, Elena flinched, expecting a weapon. He pulled out a small velvet box. "I owe you a brewery," he said softly. "But Hayes said that might be too much paperwork, so I got you this instead." He handed her the box. Elena opened it. Inside wasn't a ring. It was a pin. A small golden pin in the shape of a caduceus, the medical symbol. But the staff was a trident. "What is this?" she asked. "It's a unit pin," Elias said. "Civilian consultant. It means you're part of the team, officially." Elena looked up at him confused. "I'm retiring from the field," Elias said. "The liver damage, it was extensive. You fixed it, but Uncle Sam doesn't like his operators having scar tissue on their organs. They're putting me out to pasture." "I'm sorry," Elena said. "Don't be." He shrugged. "I've had a good run. I'm opening a private training facility for combat medics. High-stress, real-world trauma training. Teaching guys how to keep people alive when the world is ending." He took a step closer. He was close enough now that she could smell him rain leather and something that wasn't almonds. It was pine and soap. "I need a medical director," Elias said. "Someone who knows how to run a trauma bay. Someone who isn't afraid to tell a room full of testosterone-fueled idiots to shut up and listen. Someone who can do a liver resection in the dark." Elena stared at him. "You want me to work for you?" "I want you to work with me," Elias corrected. "The facility is in San Diego. Sun, ocean, no rain." I have a life here, Elena said, though it felt like a lie as soon as she said it. Do you? Elias looked around the empty wet parking lot. Because from what Hayes told me, you quit your job. You told the board to go to hell, and you've been hiding out in a strip mall clinic. Elena laughed. It was a genuine laugh. Hayes has a big mouth. He likes you. Elias smiled. So do I. The words hung in the air. So do I. Elena looked at the pin. Then she looked at the man who had been a corpse on her table, the man she had fought for the man who had guided her hand. San Diego, she asked. 75 degrees and sunny, Elias promised. And the coffee is better. Elena closed the box and held it tight. She looked at her car, then back at him. I drive a sedan, she said. It won't make it to California. Elias walked over to his truck. He opened the passenger door. Good thing I brought the truck, he said. Elena stood there for a moment. The rain was soaking her hair running down her neck. She looked at the urgent care clinic. It was safe. It was boring. It was grey. She looked at Elias Thorne. He was dangerous. He was complicated. He was alive. Elena walked to her car, grabbed her purse, and locked it. She would send a tow truck for it later. Or maybe she would just leave it. She walked to the truck and climbed into the passenger seat. Elias climbed in the driver's side. The cab was warm. The engine purred like a beast. Ready? He asked. Elena looked at him. For the first time in 6 months, the knot in her chest loosened. Drive, she said. The truck pulled out of the lot, turning south, disappearing into the rainy night, leaving the ghosts of Mercy General behind, forever. And that is how the worst night of Elena Vance's life became the start of her greatest adventure. She went from being a silenced nurse to the medical director of the world's most elite tactical medicine school. She taught hundreds of medics how to save lives in the dark, always telling them the story of the ghost in OR 3. Doctor. Sterling is currently serving 2 consecutive life sentences in a federal supermax. He never held a scalpel again. This story reminds us that sometimes the heroes aren't the ones with the guns or the badges. Sometimes the hero is the person who simply refuses to leave the room when everyone else runs away. Elena Vance stood her ground against a broken system and a deadly poison. And in doing so, she didn't just save a soldier. She saved herself. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. We post incredible true-to-life drama stories every single week. What would you have done if you were in Eleanor's shoes? Would you have stayed in the room? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.